Okay, Erev Tov, Erev Tov. Toda Rabah. We're going to get started. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Stephen Arnoff. I'm the CEO of the Fuchsberg Jerusalem Center, and we have a few friends joining us on Zoom. You can't see them, but anyone who speaks can. And we know that Pesach Zichrono Lebracha would have already started the program on time 20 minutes ago, which would have been 2 minutes early. But we'll ask for forgiveness because we really wanted to make sure that some of our honor guests were here. First of all, we're delighted to be in the Epstein-Geller David Beit Midrash. Some of you know Rabbi Jerry Epstein, Jane Epstein, who were such partners to Reb Pesach in the journey of creating the center. We're joined online by Judy Udoff. I want to make a very significant gesture of thanks to Judy and Mark Udoff. It was with the Udoffs that we dreamed up the idea of having Schindler Scholars each year. It's through their generosity and other supporters who have joined them that we're able to provide support to the scholars and are in the process of establishing a Schindler Scholarship Fund, which God willing will serve as a means for people to study on this campus in the memory and in the light of one of our founders. So thank you, Judy, and thank you, Mark. We have a few board members here. Glad to see Rabbi Vernon Kurtz and Bryna, Rabbi Paul Friedman. I'm not sure if anybody's ever met Paul and Nina, but if you're not familiar, you should get to know them. And Lorraine Skufsky is here, also from our board. The people I'm thanking, it's not unusual and it's important because we really are in so many ways a kind of family institution. We all stand on the shoulders of giants. Rabbi Joel Levy, who's here, who's our Rosh Yeshiva, Dr. Josh Kolp, Rabbi Dr. Josh Kolp. Our team, want to thank Hila Lipnick, our COO, and Miriam for helping us to put this event together. And the Yeshiva students, of course. If I've left anyone out, it's unintentional. You'll hear from our Schindler scholars in just a moment, Joe Crossley, Noga DeCalo, and Matthew Nelson, and we're really delighted that you've given us a reason to be here. Before we hear a little bit from Joel, from Rabbi Levy, and of course from the students, we're actually going to have a distinct pleasure of hearing from Reb Pesach's one of his kids, Meir. I'm glad that Chaya and Meir and Avi are here. I know that we have another rep here, but I didn't get your name, so I wrote him. And I think Noam's on his way down the stairs right now. That's the oldest of the grandchildren. So you practically brought a minion with you, and we appreciate that. The Schindler Scholarship was envisioned to bring to a visceral experience the vision of Pesach. I only know him through the stories, almost like a Hasidic student who never got to know the Rebbe. But I know that he would run from, not run, rush, but jog, as in jogging from home to work to Mount Scopus here and back home. I know that he could do that playing a viola, but that's actually in the legendary category. I know that he could learn a Daf Gemara with the dosim of the dosim of the dosim, and also have the audacity to team up with our predecessor, Yitz Jacobson, Zichrono Lebracha, to dream up a campus where every person would feel invited and welcome, men and women, religious and not religious, everyone on the spectrum of religious and spiritual seeking would be invited to the Fuchsberg Jerusalem Center. This is countercultural in 1972. This is countercultural in 2025, but that doesn't mean it's not right. That is exactly right. It's exactly right. The tradition should be available to everyone, regardless of their background, regardless even why they are seeking it. And I am certain that however that vision is transmitted and translated through the vision of the work that we do today, that is part of Reb Pesach's journey, and it's part of his vision for us. We are inheritors of a legacy. We mark that with the three scholars who are with us today, who you'll hear from each year. Those who are provided with that scholarship will give a Devar Torah and we'll break bread together in honor of the legacy and in honor of them. Before we hear from Rabbi Joel, a few words. I do want to ask Mayor just to share a little bit of the reflections that really count, which is from someone who knew Pesach, and we're so glad that your family's here, and honored that you bring your light to this Beit Midrash. Thank you.
On behalf of the Schindler family, I'd like to wish Mazal Tov to the three outstanding students being honored today: Noga DeCalo, Matthew Nelson, and Joe Crossley. An amazing achievement and accomplishment. Mazal Tov and Yishar Kochachem. My dad always put a premium not only on academic excellence, but on any kind of excellence. If my dad were here today, he'd be the one standing here, being so proud of you as his students in his center, having a lot to say, praise, advise, and encourage more adequately and more eloquently than myself. My family and I are grateful to you personally, Dr. Stephen Arnoff, Dr. Stephen Arnoff, and to the Fuchsberg Center for initiating and organizing this so special event in my dad's memory and legacy. Thank you so much. It's still difficult for me talking about my dad in the past, since for me, my dad is still very much alive, vibrant, enthusiastic, and energetic. My dad excelled at whatever he did, and not only as a result of his many natural talents and creativity, but mainly because he simply worked hard, never wasted time, and made honest efforts to succeed and achieve. My dad was able to focus on whatever he was doing, it being major objectives or minor trivial ones, being very disciplined and determined to beat all obstacles by retaining a certain naivety, trusting and believing in people while maintaining high moral and religious standards. My dad opened this center more than 50 years ago in June 1972. I assure you it wasn't easy for him. It wasn't easy at all. I remember vividly the difficulties my dad had to deal with, but assuming responsibility and with sheer determination, my dad turned this place into a thriving center, initiating numerous successful programs, attracting a cross-section of the Israeli society of all ages, backgrounds, and beliefs. My dad's willingness to assist, advise, and encourage earned him the admiration and respect from his family, friends, colleagues, and students. My dad, as an academic and rabbinical authority, earned the respect from the religious and non-religious establishments, enabling this center and the Masorti movement in Israel to receive a basic legitimacy. Stephen, with your special talents, creativity, and leadership, you have succeeded in implementing my dad's vision, and Bezrat Hashem will continue for many more years to develop this center to all sectors in Jerusalem, uletiferet Medinat Yisrael. Thanks, Paul.
It's kind of strange to hear that Reb Pesach had to work so hard to gain his sense of being a Ben Torah, his sense of being really at home within the tradition. Because from the end of a student, and I met him when I was a young student here in the 90s, it felt like that was effortless. It felt like he was at home within the tradition and spoke as the voice of the tradition. And that didn't feel like something he was working hard to attain. He felt like a Ben Bayit. Felt like this was him, and when he spoke with an authentic voice of Judaism. I think that for me was partly connected to him emerging out of Europe before the war. That he came from those ancient Jewish traditions that had been in Europe for hundreds of years, and and he'd grown up within that world. And I'm kind of, it's kind of funny to hear that he worked, if you know what I mean, to attain that sense of being at home within Judaism. But I guess that's true, meaning Nietzsche says that there's a kind of paradox within culture, which is that you inherit it, but you also have to work for it. If my wife is the offspring of classical musicians, so there was an assumption that she would be a classical musician, which she was for 20 years. But the fact that her parents were classical musicians didn't mean that she didn't have to work her fingers to the bone to learn how to play the bassoon. Like you don't imbibe culture from your parents and then not have to work from it. You can inherit it, but you have to work for it. That's true whether you're learning how to play the viola or learning how to play Judaism. Like you still have to work. I want to say a little bit based on a verse that we're all extremely familiar with about what it means to inherit the tradition. And I think I say these words to primarily to the students of the yeshiva, who are all, I would say, on that journey to finding a home, a genuine home within Judaism. And sometimes that journey feels tortuous, especially if you've grown up either outside Judaism entirely or in a Welsh village where there were no Jews in the village apart from my family. And I was a smart kid who was interested in Judaism but certainly hadn't opened a daf of Gemara until my 20s. Like that journey to that you could speak as the voice of tradition and not feel that you were a fraud in some way. I'm not looking at anyone in particular when I say this, but the fact that you might speak with tradition, the voice of tradition, having come from without, is what I want to address a little bit. And also, I suppose I say that in memory of Reb Pesach, who so much for many of us felt like he was coming straight out of the Jewish tradition, that his words were an authentic expression of Judaism, straight from the heart. So the verse that I want to focus in on, there's a little bit risque stuff material as well. How long have I got? Have I got quarter of an hour or something like that? 20 minutes. The verse that I want to focus in on is from the end of the book of Deuteronomy, and it's a verse we all know well. Torah tziva lanu Moshe Morasha kilat Yaakov. From Deuteronomy chapter 33. Moses commanded us Torah, the inheritance of the Kilah of Jacob. And that's a verse that we know well. It's the verse that we sing. It's the verse that we're very familiar with. Torah tziva lanu Moshe Morasha kilat Yaakov. That verse is used in a variety of interesting ways in the Talmud. Some of them I think very beautiful, some of them a little darker, and I want to bring a bit of both, a little bit of the beauty and a little bit of the darkness as well. So first of all, a kind of a text that was shocking from the Bavli, from Masechet Sanhedrin 91. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Kol hamonea halacha mipi talmid, anyone who holds back a halacha from his student, ki'ilu gozlo minachalat avotav, it's as if he's stealing it from him, from the inheritance of his ancestors. Shene'emar Torah tziva lanu Moshe Morasha kilat Yaakov, as it says, Moses commanded us Torah, the inheritance of the congregation of Jacob. Morashahi lakol Yisrael misheshit yimei bereshit. It's an inheritance for Israel from the 6 days of creation. That's a weird way of thinking about teaching. It's a weird way of thinking about teaching. Like normally when I think about teaching, you might think, I have some information and I have students who want to learn and I teach the students who want to learn. But this text is going much further than that and saying the tradition belongs to your student. Sorry. I should have run through this a couple of times before I did it because it's moving. It belongs to your student It's not that you're giving them something that's yours and you give it to them by choice. It's that the student owns the Torah that you're teaching them. They have a right to it. If you didn't teach it to them, you would be stealing it from them. If you know something or you have a capacity to teach something and you failed to teach your student that thing, you should feel that you stole it from them, that you were a thief. It belongs to you. It's as if it's your possession and I'm just handing over what belongs to you already. That way of thinking puts an enormous onus, a burden on the teacher. You might go to bed at night thinking, did I give them what was theirs? Or did I steal it from them in some way? Did I not find a way to articulate the tradition that would allow the student to take what was rightfully theirs? That should leave a teacher at night worrying about whether they did their job properly. Because it's not just you weren't quite a good enough teacher, it's that you might have been a thief. You might have stolen Judaism from your student. The same idea appears in classical sources around tzedakah. There's a beautiful piece from the Al-Sheikh who says, you shouldn't think about, when you give tzedakah, you shouldn't think that you're a nice person giving tzedakah to somebody. You should think, the money in my pocket belongs to the person who's receiving it. If I don't give it to them, I'm a thief. He says, the Al-Sheikh says, when you're giving to the poor from your field, don't think that you're giving of yours, think that you're giving of his. Because the poor has dibs on your field. He has a right to your field. It's his wheat in your field. And therefore you have to hand it over, and if you don't, you're a thief. That's a totally different way of thinking about what it means to teach, what it means to transmit. What would it take for a student to have internalized the idea that it is genuinely their morasha? What does it mean for a student to internalize the idea that they're not tinkering around at the edges or playing at being Jewish, but the material that they learn is theirs. It's their morasha, it's their inheritance. I think that requires a kind of process in a student to go from feeling like an outsider to feeling like an insider. And I really, really hope and pray that every student who sets foot in this institution, and especially the students that we're honouring tonight, have gone on a journey where they can genuinely feel like B'nai Bayit, they can feel at home within Judaism. You don't get to feel at home within the tradition unless you really work at it. The second text, I think, says that. This text is a little more edgy and a little bit more risque, using the same verse, but maybe in a slightly different way. From Psachim, Tanei Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia taught, Kal ha'osek b'Torah lifnei am ha'aretz. Someone who does that Torah thing, who engages in the thing that we do when we study Torah, in the presence of Amei Haaretz, in the presence of people who are not learned, Ki'ilu bo'el arusato b'fanav. It's as if he had sex with the Am Haaretz's betrothed bride, b'fanav, in his presence. Shene'emar Torah tzivalanu Moshe morasha. As it says, Moses commanded us Torah, an inheritance of the congregation of Jacob. Al tikrei morasha ela ma'orasa. Don't read it as an inheritance, but rather read it as a betrothal. This is a very weird text. I'll say that again. It's bizarre. If you la'asok b'Torah, if you do that kind of complicated, clever Torah learning-y kind of thing in the presence of Amei Haaretz, it's as if you had sex with the Am Haaretz's betrothed bride, who he's never had sex with, in his presence, which is a totally disgusting and demeaning thing to do. You totally demeaned the Am Haaretz. It's as if you had sex with his mu'oreset, his betrothed one, in his presence. as it says, Torah tzivalanu Moshe Mo'orasa Kilat Yaakov. They reread Morashah to Mo'orasa. Moses commanded us Torah, the betrothed one of the Keilah of Jacob. What on earth is this text trying to say? It's kind of weird. Should I have done this? Okay, this is what I think he's saying. He's saying that the Am Haaretz, the Jewish person who is on the outside of Jewish discourse, let's say, the person who's on the outside, the person who doesn't get it, who's like me when I first came to yeshiva, when I first came to the conservative yeshiva in 95 or 6. Like the person who's on the outside, if you do clever Torah in front of that person, what's that image? It's as if you had sex with my betrothed one in my presence. It means that as someone who doesn't do Torah, you have this relationship with Torah, which is, as it were, passionate but unfulfilled. The Torah is for you as a mu'orasa. The Torah is for you like someone you're engaged to, but you've never had a deep relationship with. You've never fallen into her and consummated your relationship. You are betrothed to the Torah, but it's an unconsummated relationship. And Am Haaretz, the Torah belongs to them, but the Torah belongs to them in a technical, abstract way. They've never consummated that relationship. If you teach Torah in a clever way in front of Amei Haaretz, in front of people who don't know Torah, it's like showing off that you can do consummated Torah, that you can do clever Torah in the presence of someone who wants to but can't do that thing. And that's obscene, that's an obscenity. To sleep with someone's mu'orasa in their presence is a really awful thing to do. So the Am Haaretz, the person who doesn't know Torah, who's never done the yeshiva thing, who's never learnt this stuff, if you show off your Torah learning or you do Torah learning in their presence, then that can be an act which feels like you're proving how intimate your relationship with Torah is in the presence of someone who yearns for intimacy but can't have it because they're an outsider in the discourse. It says, Rabbi Chia says, don't do that. Don't do that. Like, that's cruel. It's cruel to show off how clever your relationship is with Torah in the presence of someone who can't dive in, can't consummate the relationship with Torah, has never had the opportunity, but you can. Look how clever I am. That's such a different take on Mu'orasa and Morashah. Torah tzivalanu Moshe Morashah Kilat Yaakov is dangerous. It's dangerous. The last thing you want to do is to leave Jews out of that conversation. The last thing you want to do is to leave people feeling that after they've encountered the world of Torah, they feel more excluded rather than more included. They feel that you've showed off what your relationship was as opposed to drawing them to consummate their relationship with Torah. To consummate their relationship with Torah. I think it's actually beautiful that he's using sexual imagery here. But that's often the case. The Torah and Israel are married to each other, and there's a sexual image being played out. So so what I want to, I'll close here. I mean, I don't need to learn all the sources, but what I wanted to suggest through these texts is that I really want, as a teacher, my students to have a consummated relationship with Torah. I want them to consummate their relationship. I want them to go from feeling like they're betrothed. I think this is how I felt when I first came. I felt I was betrothed to this thing, but that we weren't yet married. That we had a kind of relationship with each other that was full of yearning, but I couldn't dive in. I couldn't consummate that relationship. And I think what happens after a year at the yeshiva, or better, 2 years at the yeshiva, or even better, 3 years at the yeshiva, like after a bit of time of learning, You move from an unconsummated relationship to a consummated relationship. You say, I really wanted to move from being betrothed to Torah to being married to Torah. I really want to move from being someone who's on the outside of Jewish discourse to someone who's on Jewish discourse. I want to feel like that it's okay for me to think of myself as a Ben Torah or a Bat Torah. It's okay for me to feel at home within this tradition. And when I met Reb Pesach for the first time, I think it was one of the first people I met who I felt was genuinely in every part of himself a Ben Torah, someone who felt at home within Torah. And he did that in such a way that it didn't feel like he was showing off. It felt like he was inviting you in to become a part of that conversation, which he did. He invited hundreds of people to join that conversation. And the yeshiva is still a place which welcomes people to become B'nai Bayit, welcomes people to become at home within Torah, welcomes people to consummate that relationship, which sounds amazing, to move from yearning to consummation, and to feel like, which is what we're going to hear in a second, to feel like your voice is an authentic voice of Torah. And when we hear the students speaking in a few moments, it's not just because they have cool things to say. It's because each of them has gone on a journey to be able to stand up and say, I've gone on a journey so that I can actually truly feel that this is my morashah, this is my inheritance, that I own this, it's a part of me, and my voice is a part of Judaism, and that's okay. That's good. It's good, and it's healthy, and it's wholesome, and my voice should be a part of the Jewish discourse. So when we hear each of the students, it's not just that they've learned stuff, it's that they've learned to become B'nai Bayit. And I'll say that one of the teachers of the yeshiva spoke to me about one of the students, I'm going to say who that is, spoke to me about one of the students, and I'm not going to say who that is, and said, I don't understand how that person can speak Torah the way they speak Torah. I don't understand how they do that. How could someone who came from outside the community of the learned talk and think and feel Torah the way they talk and feel Torah? So one of the teachers, unnamed, said that about one of the students, unnamed. But that's what it's about. It's about making that transition to becoming at home, and to make the transition from being engaged to Torah to being married to Torah, and to make the transition to feeling that your voice is an authentic expression of our ancient tradition. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Joel. Tradition is links in a chain. So now we get to the part where we really have an opportunity to hear not just about what's happening here in this Beit Midrash, but we get to have a little bit of a look into the future. I don't think we should ever underestimate the power of certain common phrases, like what is a legacy, or what is it to be a link in the chain. I never met Reb Pesach. The first time I met him was at his yeshiva, right? But I feel like I know him. Why? Because the stories and the teachings are so vivid that it doesn't feel like there's a gap between what I met in real time and what I have come to know. The institution, that same experience, and I think Jewish tradition is formed around that same experience. So Rabbi Joel had the unique and everlasting experience of actually learning with Reb Pesach, but our Schindler scholars did not. That doesn't mean that they're not connected. So the point of this evening is to affirm publicly with the family, with our teachers, with some of our students, that it's real. The connection is real, the legacy is real, the links in the chain are real. And now we're going to hear a little bit from the students who have carried this honor. They're all students who have been here for more than 1 year. They're all students who have been supported during their time of study, and they're all part of the legacy of Reb Pesach. So please, Joe is going to be the first.
Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah taught one day in the study hall. These sages render an object ritually impure, and these render it pure. These prohibit an action, and these permit it. These deem an item invalid, and these deem it valid. Lest a person say, "Now, how can I study Torah?" The verse states they are all given from one shepherd. One God gave them. One leader said them from the mouth of the master of all creation, blessed be he. As it is written, and God spoke all these words. So, too, you make your ears like a funnel and acquire for yourself an understanding heart, to hear the statements of those who render objects ritually impure and the statements of those who render them pure, the statements of those who prohibit actions and the statements of those who permit them, the statements of those who deem items invalid and the statements of those who deem them valid. And on the same theme, the Pachad Yitzchak writes, included in the idea that these and these are the words of the living God, is the fundamental principle that even a rejected halachic proposition is a Torah view, provided it has been articulated within the terms of the discourse of the oral Torah. The battles over Torah are not simply one of the many aspects of Torah. Rather, the battles over Torah constitute the active creation of new Torah values, the likes of which cannot be found in garden variety Torah teachings. This sort of living halachic Judaism is the sort to which I am committed. One of my teachers, Rabbi Adam Zagoria Moffat, uses the metaphor of a chess game to explain the post-Enlightenment development of Judaism into separate streams. Reform Judaism, he says, I hope I'm not going to offend anybody, is what you get when you try to play chess without rules. The knight starts moving sideways, and the queen and the bishop swap places, and eventually all of the pieces fall off the board altogether. The board is still there, but the game can't be played in the same way anymore. Orthodox Judaism, on the other hand, he says, is what you get when you put a glass dome over the board and spend many hours staring at it, talking about how this piece got to that place, or what moves were made to get the board to the state it's in now. Once again, though, the game is not actually being played. Masorti Judaism at its best, at what it should be, Rabbi Adam says, is playing the game. And when I came here 2 years ago, it was because I wanted to learn how to play the game. Having spent an inspiring 2 weeks on the short Tevet program, I was pretty convinced that Rabbi Joel and Shia knew the singular uncorrupted philosophy of true Judaism, which explained precisely what sort of life one ought to live and why, and that if I just stuck around for another year, they would teach it to me. Learning to play any game, first and foremost, involves learning the rules. I explained to my non-Jewish friends and family that a yeshiva was, quote, a cross between a university and a monastery. Perhaps a bit grandiose. But I was trying to convey something true, something Rabbi Joel had told me before, that a yeshiva was about entering a spiritual discipline. It was okay to have questions. Answers to those questions, and the means to answer them for myself, would come not through theoretical ruminations on what practices were already meaningful to me, but through grappling with uncomfortable texts, performing unfamiliar rituals, engaging faithfully with Judaism, and constructing new meaning in it for myself. As such, I was prepared to sacrifice instincts to the contrary and enter a set of practices and ideas I didn't understand and which were shared by few people I knew at home. Strapping little boxes to myself every day, blessing fruits before I ate them, being careful not accidentally to cook my tea on Shabbos, as it were, as part of the experience of yeshiva. And to a great extent, despite my frustrations, it worked. A new world opened before my eyes. I found myself deriving meaning from texts I previously couldn't have read below their surface. At first, I remember not understanding why Rabbi Josh wouldn't opine about halacha in a broad sense, why he said the best way to study was just to learn as many individual things as possible. Just tell me what it's about, I thought. But I trusted him, and I kept going until one day I realized I was making connections between things which were obscure and unimportant. In a new way, I began to feel the boundless well of our tradition speaking to me directly, and I feel this still. But at the same time, I always knew that one day I would have to go back. For however long I was bounded in the nutshell of the yeshiva, counting myself a king of infinite space, I would eventually have to go back. And now I am going back. And I find myself having to make new choices. I'm moving in with a flatmate who keeps kosher in as much as he's vegetarian. He's not fussy about hechshers. Am I? I'm starting work and I don't know anyone at home who davens every day before work. Can I? After 2 years away, my friends are excited to see me, and they're asking me whether I can eat dinner at their houses. Can I? How can I decide? I don't yet know what God expects of me, and I don't know what my community expects of me, and I have a feeling the two are not always related. I could find many committed Jews who would tell me to follow my conscience, and that God doesn't concern himself with such small matters. There are ideas with which I haven't yet developed a relationship. There are practices which, whilst doing them faithfully, I've always felt quietly a lack of connection, or a sense that they were not as meaningful to me as something else. It would be easy to let such things slide, but the chiyuv, the requirement, whether that's the Sinaitic requirement to keep the law and all its precepts, or the spiritual requirement to keep developing as a Jew and not to slip backwards, hasn't gone away. Mediating this tension has been a key part of my thinking this year. I've been reflecting on the lives of two rabbinic figures. The first is Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. Like me, he grew up without a religious framework. Like me, he decided to enter a new religious framework. He by leaving his father's landed estate to study Torah with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and I by converting to Judaism. The Talmud tells the moving story of his arrival at Rabbi Yochanan's Beit Midrash. Rabbi Yochanan said to Rabbi Eliezer, "Whose son are you?" And he did not tell him. He said to him, "In your life you have not learned to recite the Shema, or the Tefillah, or Birkat Hamazon." He said to him, "No." He said to him, "Stand, and I will teach you these three." He sat, and he cried. He said to him, "My son, why are you crying?" He said to him, "For I wish to learn Torah." And he would say to him 2 halachot every day of the week, and he would review them and cling to them. Rabbi Yochanan, seeing that Rabbi Eliezer will not say who his father is, seeing that his father has not taught him that which he's so desperate to know, gives him a small gesture of immense comfort. He calls him my son. He has found his adoptive family. Rabbi Eliezer is later quoted as saying that he never taught anything except that which he heard directly from his teachers. A conservative approach to halacha can be explained biographically. Once you've abandoned your heritage for an adoptive family, one that means so much to you, you don't want to start contradicting them. Or perhaps you're afraid what people will think of the authenticity of your decision. I think people sometimes view converts this way. If Miriam Isaac turns on the oven on Shabbos because she doesn't have a platter, or Benjamin Greenspan falls off the derech after his year at Aish and starts eating hot dairy out, it's because they're embracing their religious freedom as a Jew. They might be sinners, but they're Jewish sinners. Meanwhile, if I eat kitniot on Pesach, people will say I missed the memo. I didn't learn the halacha properly. I'm just not fully enculturated. Sometimes it's easier to be machmir. Rabbi Eliezer is on such a quest for certainty that he refuses to paskin unless he's quoting a greater authority. The Talmud tells us a story. One sukkot sitting in a sukkah, and the sun reaches a point in the sky such that it becomes hot and uncomfortable inside. The owner of the sukkah asks him whether it's permitted to spread a sheet over the roof to block the sun. Rabbi Eliezer replies, "There is no tribe of Israel from which a judge did not emerge." The owner asks him again whether it's permitted, and he deflects again. Finally, he takes the sheet and spreads it over the sukkah, and Rabbi Eliezer gets up, gets his coat, and leaves. Why would he not just say it's forbidden? Because whilst he figured that out for himself, he'd never heard it explicitly from one of his teachers. He's playing it safe. But he's not safe, because Rabbi Eliezer's quest for total certainty, his faith in the integrity and therefore unchangeability of the law, his refusal to get up and start turning that faith into something practical in the real world, is also his undoing. In the famous story of the oven of Achnai, he repeatedly contradicted, sticking firmly to his own opinion on the purity of the oven. I like to imagine that this is because he heard it from Rabbi Yochanan, the man who had taught him so much and who meant so much to him. He sticks to his guns even when it results in his own excommunication, rendering him unable to take part in the legal process any further. And on his deathbed, when the other rabbis come to visit him, he remarks mournfully, "I can teach 300 halachot with regard to a white leprous mark, but no person has ever asked me anything about them. Knowledge and integrity without wisdom and applicability is hollow. As my teacher Rav Eitan Tucker once said, it doesn't matter how well you're playing if your team is still going to lose." What's the alternative to Rabbi Eliezer's quest for totality? The other rabbinical story upon which I have been reflecting is that of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rabbi Eliezer's teacher. During the siege of Jerusalem, just prior to the destruction of the Second Temple, Rabbi Yochanan negotiates with the Roman general and future Emperor Vespasian to save Judaism despite the fall of Jerusalem. Vespasian says, "Ba'ei minai midei de'eten lach. Ask of me something I can give you." Rabbi Yochanan asks for 3 things: Yavne and her sages, the line of Rabban Gamliel, and doctors to heal Rabbi Tzadok, who had been praying for the safety of Jerusalem. A later sage criticizes Rabbi Yochanan. Didn't he ask for Vespasian to leave the Jews alone entirely? And the Gemara answers, "Husfar dilma kule hai la aved, v'hatzla purta nami la have." He thought that perhaps he would not do all of that, and there would not even be a small salvation. The approach of Rabbi Yochanan, in other words, it's better than nothing. Yet on his deathbed, Rabbi Yochanan weeps. His students ask him why, and he replies, Yesh lafanai shnei drachim, achat shel gan Eden ve'achat shel Gehenna, ve'eini yodeh be'ezu molichem oti, v'lo evche. I have before me two paths, one of Gan Eden and one of Gehenna, and I do not know upon which they are leading me, and will I not weep? He negotiated to save Jerusalem, and he is dying not knowing whether he has saved it or killed it. And his students have wildly different approaches to the emerging rabbinic tradition, conservatism, innovation. Who can say which way things are headed or what is correct? Is it true that a little is better than nothing? Could he have gone all the way? If he'd asked, would Jerusalem have been saved? How can he know any of this? He cannot. Even the man who saved Judaism died not knowing his fate. The very best of our sages did not have certainty, but he acted decisively anyway. The best we can do will have to be enough. Rabbi Yochanan ben Napacha, his namesake, a later Babylonian Amora, says that the war with the Romans initially began due to the events of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. In that story, Bar Kamsa is scorned at a dinner by his host and resolves to betray Jerusalem to the Romans. He concocts a plot whereby the rabbis will be forced by halacha to insult the Romans and cause them to think a Jewish plan is emerging. The rabbis come up with two solutions: to avoid the insult and submit to Rome, or to kill Bar Kamsa so the Romans don't find out. A rabbi called Zechariah ben Avkolas objects, saying that either one will cause the general public to misunderstand the halacha more broadly. Rabbi Yochanan ben Napacha says that the excessive humility of Rabbi Zechariah destroyed Jerusalem. This is strange language. Why does it say humility? Rashi says because of his excessive tolerance, that he didn't accept the necessity of the situation and what was going to happen if he stuck to his principle alone. On this, I found that the Chida, an 18th century Sephardi rabbi, says in his Petach Einayim, this, about humility, comes to illuminate a great principle in the service of God. A person must always carefully consider everything he does, being watchful and observant, seeing the consequences of his actions. As it is written, sometimes the nullification of Torah is its preservation. That's Reish Lakish in Menachot. This is the foundation upon which everything depends, to weigh every action with the Shekel HaKodesh, whether in worldly matters or in spiritual matters. A righteous person examines the right and proper way, both in the present and in the future, so that no error will occur, God forbid. He should direct his eyes and heart towards heaven, for God will not withhold good from those who walk with sincerity. He will guide them on the path he chooses. God will not withhold good from those who walk with sincerity. Sometimes the nullification of Torah is its preservation. The consequences matter, not just the intention. This reminds me of something Rabbi Joel has always taught, that following Judaism, following halacha, shouldn't make you a worse or more anxious person. He said once, life is not a journey on which you become progressively more and more frum. Stop, take a step back, try another way. And as Rav Shuki says, if halacha is anything, it has to be first and foremost avodat Hashem. If halacha seems to demand of us something immoral, impossible, impractically expensive, unkind, we shouldn't abandon it, but we should at least pause and think. And that pause is an exciting opportunity to learn and discover, not a desperate scrabbling for whatever truth will make my acceptable to my frummest neighbours. That's a new feeling for me, having that permission to take time, to understand it for myself, to have my own authentic voice. What's more, my teacher Shaya tells me that truth is subjectively experienced. You don't have to be able to persuade someone else of the truth of something for you to know that it's true. A judge only has what is before his eyes. And what do I have before my eyes? I have the profound truths I have realized through my experiences and learning here. I've learned to pray, to access constructed truths through deep experiences. Those moments are deeply and powerfully real. Sometimes when the going is good and Rabbi Joel is really hitting the harmony line, I can speak to a God about whom I can really tell you nothing for certain. As Wordsworth writes, hence in a season of calm weather, though inland far we be, our souls have sight of that immortal sea which brought us hither, can in a moment travel thither, and see the children sport upon the shore, and hear the mighty waters rolling evermore. It's this experiential faith, not my instinctive halachic neuroticism, that I will be trying to live through my ideas and practices when I get home. It's what I want to bring back to the British Jewish community too. And when I reflect on all these ideas in the round, that one cannot ever fully attain certainty, that doesn't matter, that the rabbis too had a concept of being uncertain and accepting the nature of the journey, that one can nonetheless be inspired and transported and committed and seek the good on one's own terms, a little better about finding my way. I think if I can share that feeling with others, they might be better placed to find their way too. I started by telling you Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's approach to the multivocality of our tradition. He told his students to learn contradictory opinions, to consider different approaches, to entertain ideas without accepting them. When he is first elevated to Reish Mativta, to the post of Rosh Yeshiva, his wife is worried that he may be deposed like his predecessor. In response, he quotes a common saying, "Let a man use an expensive goblet one day and not worry if it will break tomorrow." Over the past, I have forged a very valuable goblet indeed. It already runs over with the Torah my teachers have given me here, and I hope to go on filling it. I'm not worried what will happen to it tomorrow. In fact, I'm excited to see where it goes. When Rabbi Eliezer tells his father Hyrcanus he wants to leave the family estate and learn Torah, Hyrcanus replies, "Aren't you 28 years old and you want to learn Torah? Get a wife and father sons and take them to school instead." Luckily, I am only 27. So I'm in the clear. But when Rabbi Eliezer hears this remark, he doesn't eat anything for 2 weeks. I feel similarly that a life without continued engagement with the big questions would be no life at all. But I no longer feel so keenly the need to have them answered, not before leaving yeshiva, and perhaps not even before re-entering it with hopes of rabbinic ordination of my own. I will keep studying, keep trying to open the Torah further, until one day, as in the Zohar, I form a relationship with its innermost layer, and it says to me, "Do you see the sign, the hint which I gave you at the beginning? How many mysteries it contains?" Then everything will become clear. My teacher, Rabbi Joel, told me the thing you become on your journey is the thing you're going to bring to your community. As I continue once I leave here in becoming something else, I hope I can do it with the integrity, commitment, and deep love of Torah that I have learnt in this place.
Hello everyone, my name is Noga Dicalo, and I'm a second-year student here at the Fuchsberg Yeshiva Center, Jerusalem Center Yeshiva in the Omek track. I would like first to thank Mark and Judy Yudof and the Schindler family. You can see them? Oh, hi, thank you. So among those sitting in this room, it is highly likely that everyone has fought at least a few times in the past year and a half Jewish destiny. Unlike most people here, as you can probably hear, I was born and raised in Israel, and my understanding of anti-Semitism was more distant. I saw it as a part of history or as a political term that occasionally used in different contexts rather than an integral part of the global culture we live in. Number 7, two very different feelings have grown stronger in me. The first is the painful question of whether the state of Israel can truly be a safe place for Jewish people, or it's just another place in the world where Jews experience better times and worse times. The second is even a stronger conviction of the necessity of the Jewish state, one where we do not need to apologize for its existence or entertain absurd debates about whether it should exist or not. Still, while I believe the creation of the State of Israel was a necessary step, a lesser discussed tragedy emerged, along with the globalization following the Second World War and the Holocaust, which wiped out a third of our people. Countless Jewish traditions and cultures from around the world also faded into extinction. As someone who loves tradition and history, the past year has been filled with questions if traditions can be preserved in a globalized world, and whether it is possible to revive a tradition we did not directly inherit ourselves. I've been thinking about these questions while exploring the heritage of Sephardic Jews from the Balkans, a long-term project that I was busy with, and more seriously in the last 6 months. My father's family immigrated to Israel from Bulgaria when he was a child. His home was secular, but I still have some fragments of his Bulgarian Jewish heritage. A few phrases in Ladino, a few songs for Passover, some stories about the Bulgarian rabbi of Ramiko, who immigrated from Sofia to Jaffa, and after prayers on Shabbat morning, he used to go to watch the soccer team of the football of the soccer team associated with the Bulgarian community in Israel, Maccabi Yafo, on a motorcycle. The Sephardic tradition of the Balkans is not widely preserved. Over the past years, I've decided to delve deeper into this tradition in its different aspects, its history, its halachic rulings, its customs, its interaction with non-Sephardic communities in the Balkans, and its prayer traditions, including the Siddur that I printed from the 18th century Ladino and Hebrew, which I'm happy to show later. I will today focus on the musical aspect, particularly on the cantillation of Torah, of the Torah. So because I grew up in a secular home, when I began to engage with tradition as an adult, by necessity I was engaging with a new tradition to me. As someone who most often attends conservative synagogues, I accepted Ashkenazi Nusach and Torah trope as the defaults. I learned to read the beautiful trope of Eastern Europe nearly a decade ago. But then, after reading a few Torah portions, I began to ask myself, why exactly did I learn this particular tradition of Torah reading? And that's when I started a long internal debate where I asked myself, why are you reading in this Torah trope? Are you Ashkenazi? No, but it's beautiful. And I already know them, so why not? My synagogue follows the Ashkenazi tradition. What's wrong with that? Nothing's wrong, but why not preserve another tradition? But which tradition exactly? And am I even allowed to read with Sephardic cantillation? Isn't that a bit ridiculous? Oh, but you using the Ashkenazi trope isn't ridiculous at all. At some point, I decided to leave this internal debate behind and learned the Jerusalem Sephardic Torah trope, Sfaradi Yerushalmi. I will play it for you, or actually Miriam will play it for you in a moment. First one.
אשר ידבנו ליבו, תיקחו את תרומתי, וזאת התרומה אשר תיקחו מאיתם.
Thank you. So I learned those tropes, and this is the trope that I used for a few years, but it didn't quite feel like home. I learned that the Sephardic Jerusalem style, which is now used in most Sephardic Edot HaMizrach synagogues, actually has its origins in Aleppo, Syria, Halab. When the Jews of Aleppo came to Jerusalem and established a synagogue in 1901, they slowly influenced the Jerusalem prayer style, which was probably similar to what of the Balkan Jews used, Sephardim who spoke Ladino under Ottoman rule. The father of the Israeli writer, Aleph Bet Yoshua, Yaakov Yoshua, was a researcher of Sephardic communities, and he wrote in the middle of the 20th century, I doubt whether the new Sephardic generation knows the meaning of the term Noam Sfaradi, stiffness. Not only has the grace disappeared from our prayers, but with it also the grace of the piyutim, the liturgical songs, that accompanied us in the synagogues during times of joy. Piyutim that were a significant part of our prayers. The Sephardic synagogue was thus taken over by the Middle Eastern traditions. Those who brought to the synagogue practices we did not know. So the struggle and tensions between different groups within the Jewish people are diverse. But that in itself is evidence of how traditions, and certainly musical traditions, are far more flexible than what we might want to think. And yet, how can one truly delve into these traditions, and try to grasp something from them? Though I'm not a musician, I spent long hours listening to ethnographic recordings from the National Sound Archive. These recordings are a small window into a world that once was and is no more. I heard the melodies of the Salonican, Salonikaim, sung in low tunes that sounded melancholic to me. I heard the Bulgarians weaving between Ladino and Hebrew and Bulgarian. One special moment confirmed the legends I had heard. In one of the Rosh Hashanah piyutim, a woman's voice suddenly emerged singing in Ladino. It was Avramiko's wife, her voice emerging from the women's section. I listened to recordings from Turkey, where I found characteristics a little different from the Jerusalem Sephardic style. I was exposed to the style and chants of the Romaniotim, Balkan Jews who preserve an ancient tradition, neither Ashkenazi nor Sephardic. I found recordings of Serbian Jews whose Torah trope and reading are a bit different from other Balkan Jews, and Miriam will play for you now. I listened to it over and over, and then listened again to other Balkan readings. I found that some characteristics from the Serbian style, which we heard now, echoed in these others. I created my own Torah reading mix that was based mostly on a very good reading of a Turkish reader.
אם אחרים על פניי לא תעשי לחפשם וכל תמונה של בשמיים ממעל ואשר בארץ מתחת ואשר במים מתחת לארץ לא תשתחווה להם ולא תעובדם.
So his reading was the most coherent to me, and I incorporated elements I found in other Balkan readings, which I had heard in multiple places. This made me feel more comfortable using them. The result is a bit different from the Sfaradi Yerushalmi, which we've heard before, some kind of mix. I know I will never be able to precisely reconstruct the Sephardic Torah reading in Balkans. I also know that unlike the precise and meticulous Ashkenazi tradition, a fundamental part of Sephardic Torah chanting relies on improvisation, which I cannot do at the moment, maybe one day. But I wanted to read with those cantillations so I could feel that these people were not entirely lost and their melodies had not disappeared. And perhaps in doing so, I will feel a little less lost in the world. I realized that even if I learn and educate myself and research, there will always be areas that will remain imagined. After all, in Hebrew and in English, the word tradition, masoret, is related to the word transmission, mesira. So much depends on the transmitters and the receivers. If there is any comfort in the unimaginable cultural loss I mentioned, it's the ability to be exposed to many cultures around me in a significant way. My grandparents probably did not know what Yiddish sounds like until they immigrated to Israel. But as a Jewish language, it touches me deeply, and I do not need to have a genetic connection to it in order to feel it. This probably wouldn't have happened if the state of Israel hadn't been established. I'm quite Israeli, as you can probably hear, but the liberal religious movements from the US feels like my true home. Those are not part of the rigid theology that developed in Israel, categorized as either religious or secular. So, alongside with that loss, there are also interesting phenomena and cultural diversity and unexpected encounters. Another example, the community where I work as an education coordinator, and it's also my community, is the conservative community of Mayanot here in Jerusalem. Some of you may know it. And it feels like another home to me. This is also why I wanted to study at the Fuchsberg Center. I love places that don't have a set idea of the ideal graduate. I appreciate the freedom and intellectual flexibility alongside the high level of learning. This specific study I described today couldn't have happened without the openness of the Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Joe. I want to thank Rabbi Shuki, whose vast knowledge helped me listen to a variety of recordings. I also want to thank Hila, Miriam, Elian, all the staff members. Thank you, Matt, my chavruta, and all of my friends here. And thanks to everyone that helped me to fulfill my dream of studying Torah. At this point, I want to conclude with a Mishnah I learned, which I find relevant to this question of tradition. So the Mishnah in Masechet Shkalim tells us about the temple, the 13 boxes that were used to keep the money donated to the temple, the 13 tables that were there, and the 13 bows that the priest performed. The priest would bow 13 times, and some of them added another one more. Where was the extra one? In front of the woodpile. Because they had a tradition from their aunt that the ark was hidden there. The priest bowed 13 times towards the gates of the temple and added an extra one. Not everyone did it, just some of the families that had this tradition. Commentators explain that the ark was hidden there by King Josiah, who knew that the temple would eventually be destroyed and the Israelites would be exiled. The priests bow in front of that place because they trust the tradition, but they did not know for sure until one priest was working and noticed that an area of the floor was different from the rest. He told his friends, but before he could finish speaking, his soul left him. And they knew for sure that the ark was hidden there. His tragic death gave them confirmation. Their ancestors were right. This moment is surely terrible, but also powerful. Our ancestors were right. Our tradition was true. Reading the story plainly, it is enviable, minus the tragic ending. But looking at it more critically, the very need to tell the story is the yearning for a sign that my tradition is real. It could be that this very yearning and desire for truth is in the root of every tradition. I thought about dedicating this word of Torah to my grandmother, my father's mother. My father passed away almost a decade ago, and my grandmother passed away earlier this year. She was a Bulgarian Israeli Sephardic Jew, and my deep love for her is likely the reason why I'm delving into the Balkan Jews. But I realize that no dedication is necessary. I know that everything I do will be full of my love for her and her love for me. Thank you very much.
I wanted to show a few texts that I think sort of highlight what's special about yeshiva. So I say a few things about me. I came to Israel in 2013. Supposed to come for the year. The year turned into, 12 years, I guess. And my first stop was I was on Nativ, and I was here at the yeshiva. I joined the army afterwards, and then after the army, I spent another year at the yeshiva. So I actually get to be the only student to have done the yeshiva's Hesder program. When I was here in 2013, I actually, when I was here in 2013, I was lucky enough to meet Rav Pesach and even to learn a little bit of Chassidut with him. I didn't get the full experience that we hear a lot of people describing, but what I can say is that what I learned, what I got from him was there was this just incredible presence, and there was just chen, and to just sit with him and listen to him read Chassidut. It was, it was to see the joy that he had at just opening up a page of Chassidut and reading it, and it was a very powerful experience for me, and I'm blessed that I not only got to meet him for the small amount that I did, but that I got to, for the past 2 years, learn in his name. That was a great honor for me. After the year I spent here at the Army, I went to university, and now I'm back here. And oftentimes people ask me, why do I keep coming back to this place? And what I think is special about the yeshiva is that today it's very hard to connect to Torah. When you're a modern person, there's lots of things in the Torah that make people uncomfortable, that make things complicated, and it feels to me like most places will do one of two things. Certain places, maybe more to the right, will sort of double down on whatever thing is problem. If you think it's a problem, that's your problem. It's actually not a problem. It's the society that makes you think that way. And maybe on the other side, the sort of reaction to it is to sort of just, yeah, there's a few things that make us uncomfortable, and so we don't read those things. But here, you're able to come here as yourself with whatever sensibilities you have, and read the Torah and be honest about it, and struggle with it, and talk about it. And those conversations are not things that we're meant to shy away from, and it's conversations that we're encouraged to have here every day. So I have a couple of texts that here, we'll pass around, that I want to look at, that they're mostly texts from the Zohar that talk about the story of Moses. If I'm teaching Zohar, I also have to say, talking about the yeshiva, that the fact that I have an ability even to read Zohar wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for Shaya, who not only did Shaya, who's a teacher here, teach me how to read the Zohar, but he also taught me to recognize that I'm able to read the Zohar. When I was here for the year after I finished the Army, I spent a lot of time with Shaya learning Zohar, and when the year came to a close, I was really nervous because I wanted to learn more Zohar, and I didn't know what to do without Shaya. And I said to him, I don't know what to do, and he said, you can open up the Zohar and you can read it. And I thought, that was like, wow, that was, I had no idea I could do that. And so the particular material that we're going to be looking at, the material I learned with another teacher of mine, Avram Leader, who I also would never have become acquainted with Avram if it wasn't for Shaya. So I also have to, Shaya gets all the credit. Really. So the first, and most of the texts I translated, so if there's any, except for the first text, that's actually from Josh's Mishnah translation, but so if there's any problems with the translation, that's just my own problems. But so the first thing I wanted to look at is a famous statement in Pirkei Avot, said by Ben Bagbag, about the Torah. He says, "Hafoch ba v'hafoch ba dechol ba, uba techazi v'siv b'la lo tazua she'en lecha midat tova hemena." Says about the Torah, he says, turn it over and again turn it over, for all is therein, and look into it and become gray and old therein, and do not move away from it, for you have no better portion than it. So this is a very well-known statement. People really like it, and the reason why I wanted to put it there is because there's a very similar statement that I'll read now that comes from Rabbi Avram Abulafia. That's one of my favorite statements, where he takes that quote and he sort of he adds a little bit to it. So Abulafia says, "Kmo shamar hafuch ba v'hafoch ba." That's still the same as before. Dekula ba, v'kula becha, v'kulcha ba. So he adds to it when Ben Bagbag said, "Turn it over, for all is therein." So he adds not only is all of it all is in it, but also kula becha, all of it is in you, and all of you is in it. So this is one of my favorite statements that Abulafia makes, and generally I see it as like a very positive statement. It makes me feel happy about the Torah. But recently thinking about it, it also could be a very troubling statement, especially in the context of what I was talking about before, because, like I said, there's a lot of things in the Torah that make us uncomfortable, and kula becha, all of those things are inside of us. So the sort of the approach that I gave, that some people have, of saying like, so there's some things that make us uncomfortable. So I'm just not going to look at it. That maybe gives you a distance from those things. But Abulafi is actually saying you don't have a distance from those things. Even if they make you uncomfortable, that's also inside of you. So with that in mind, I've sort of been thinking about the problem of dealing with what could be uncomfortable in some of the texts that we learn. I think is also related to the problem of just relating to ourselves. I think all of us have parts of our psyches that make us uncomfortable, maybe that bother us. And with that in mind, I wanted to look at a couple of pieces of the Zohar that speak specifically about what's called the Tanin Hagadol, which is the Tanin is this sort of sea creature. In the Zohar, it's a bit amorphous. It could be a serpent or a few other things as well. It's also oftentimes said to also be the Leviathan, which is another sort of sea monster that's described in the Bible and also in the Talmudic literature. And I think a lot of these imageries of sea monsters oftentimes come to represent things like the sort of dormant things within us that are we're not so clear about, that are oftentimes somewhat dark. And with that in mind, I'm going to skip around. I'm not going to read the whole text that we have here from the first text I have from the Zohar, but I'll read a little bit. Amar Rabbi Shimon, hashta it legala razin de inu midafkin le'ela vitata. So Rabbi Shimon says, I'm going to reveal these secrets that cleave to above and below. Makativ bo el paro. It says bo el paro in the beginning of Parshat Bo, which means come to Pharaoh. But why? But generally you would think it would say go to Pharaoh. Lech el paro mi ba'ele. Right? My bo. Why is it bo? Ele da'ayole kucha brichu idrin batar idrin. Rather, Moses was raised in this mystical experience from God, where he went into all of this sort of internal process, where he went into all of these different chambers. Legabe tinyana chada ila atikifa, and then when he had this experience, he saw this serpent that was powerful and strong. Dekama dargi mishtal shishim mena, that there's sort of these other levels that are coming out of it. Uman ihi raza de hatanin hagadol, and this was the secret of the tanin hagadol. Umoshe dechil mine, and Moses was afraid of it. Velo kariv ele legabe inun yeorin, and he didn't come close to it. He went towards its streams, but he didn't go towards it. V'inu dargin, and went to its levels, but he didn't come close to the actual tanin. And this is the sort of important part here. Aval legabe dariv begin dechamale mishtar shesh beshorshin ilain. So it says the tanin he did not go close to. He was afraid of, but he says specifically why was Moshe afraid of the tanin? Begin dechamale mishtarish beshorshin ilain, because it was rooted in supernal roots. So it was one thing for Moses to say there's this scary entity that exists, but it was much harder for him to say there's this scary entity that exists, and the roots of it is above. There's something holy about this thing that's scaring me, and that's what became a problem for him. I'll skip ahead just to the last paragraph. I actually won't even read it. I'll just sort of describe it. He says that the Rabbi Shimon says that the tanin is the Leviathan and its mate, which we're taught in the Talmud that basically you had the Leviathan, and there was a male and a female, and it says that God he slayed the female and he salted it so that it would be preserved, and then in the world to come, he's going to kill the male, and he's going to build a sukkah out of the skin of the Leviathan, and we're going to eat the flesh that was sought to preserve it. It's one of the more Jewish descriptions of the world to come. Other religions talk about like people ascending to heaven. We say that like in the world to come there's going to be really good herring. But what's interesting about it is on the one hand there's this sort of darkness of the creature, but on the other hand we're both surrounding ourselves with it, right? We're inside the sukkah and we're also internalizing it. We're eating it. So with that in mind, I wanted to also just, I didn't bring this text, but just to describe, there's another text in the Zohar that talks about Moses, that talks about the scene where Moses hit the stone with the rock, the stone that he was supposed to talk to. And it says that the reason why he hit the stone was because there was actually the nachash, which the nachash is also oftentimes described as the tanin. The snake was on the rock, and it was actually the snake that he was supposed to speak to. But when he went up and he saw the snake on the rock, he got scared, so he hit it with his stick, and the water came out, and that's what he ends up becoming punished for. Now, this next text that we're going to look at is from a piece of Zohar called Tikkunim Chadashim. And I think it sort of references that scene. And it's part of a series of scenes where the rabbis of the Zohar are sitting around, and Moses comes to speak to them, and Moses has a lot of criticism towards them. He says that he gave them the Torah, but they turned the Torah into argumentation, that he goes into the yeshivas and people are just yelling at each other and everybody's angry at each other, and that Torah was supposed to be about speech, not about anger and argumentation. And the rhetoric that's used is every time Moshe gives a rebuke, he throws a stone. So it says, after a few of these rebukes, Kam Sadachada mi beinehu v'amar. So one of the rabbis that was there gets up and he says, Raya mehemna kamet kifin avnin dizarikat. So it says Raya mehemna, which is a name for Moses. He says, how many of these strong stones did you throw? That it's shaken the masters of the Mishnah above and below. Even the angels and the throne is shaking from these rocks that you threw. But this is your standing space. This is about you. The seventh stone that was thrown is for you, not for us. The stones that you threw, they were for you, they were not for us. Sim besela kinecha, place in the stone your nest. That was a pasuk that was written for Moses. V'shita chrinan legabech, and also the 6 stones that you threw before, they were also for you. V'lo od ele da'antu da'atmar vayachet asela v'sela. And not just that, but if we're talking about stones, you're the first person. You're the one that it says he hit the stone. V'sim besela decheve lechaper avoncha kinecha. That and when it says to put in the sela your nest, that was to repent for your sin, that it says that. Kuchabrichu mani lechu v'dibarta melasela. God said to you to talk to the stone. V'atun lo avadatun hache, and you didn't act that way. The avadatun memri b'dibora havu alafnin oraita below safek ubelow kushia umachloket. That had you done that, Torah would have existed without argumentation. The text goes on to say that the communication that Torah would have come from is what's called the Sfat HaYaor. That literally Sfat HaYaor means the shore of the river, and the river is also the domain of the Tanin, but it's a play on words because the word Safa could also mean language. So it's the language of the Yaor, or you could say even the language of the Tanin. And so why am I bringing all these sort of weird stories about serpents and whatnot, is that I think if you look at the story of Moses as told by the Zohar, you see a series of encounters with the Tanin, or with the darkness of our own internal psyches, or even maybe the darkness of the Torah. You could read it like that. First, he's born and he's placed into the river, and there's Tninim in the river. That's the Tanin's domain is the river. Later, when he sees God, he throws his staff and it turns into a snake, and that's sort of a level. That was the first stage of the relationship to Torah, as he tried to just disassociate with the snake. And when he realized he couldn't do that, he has to pick up this, turns into a staff, and he has to, with force, harness the power of the Tanin. He uses that to create plagues. He uses that to split the sea. And the end of this whole process was to move away from the forcefulness and to move into open communication. He was supposed to talk to the snake, but he failed. He wasn't able to do that. And the authors of the Zohar come to say that the Zohar was written to make a fixing for Moses' mistake. And so we have this sort of process of Torah that got cut off. So I don't know what comes after the conversation because Moses did not pass the test. But what I do know is that it is now incumbent upon us to have those conversations, and this is one of the only places that I know of where those conversations are being had every day, and where we create an environment so that people can have those conversations in a safe space, because those conversations can be scary conversations, it could be destabilizing, but we have incredible teachers that come here and support all of these students and give us a place where we can struggle with things. We don't have to pretend that things that bother us. We can have tough conversations, and I think almost every person who comes in here, that those conversations, they don't drive them away from Torah. It usually brings them closer to Torah, and so for me, it's always a great honor to step into this space, and I hope to continue the relationships that I've made with all these teachers and with these wonderful students. And I'd like to thank everybody who has come to make this place function and work, and of course also to thank the Schindler family and Judy, and I hope that we all can come to a place where we have those conversations, and we can come into the Torah with whatever it is we have, and openly struggle and engage. Thank you. And
Yishar Kochachem, Joe, Noga, and Matt. Really, really special and really important. The conversation here continues upstairs over. I think Matt brought some herring.
Check the kashrut on that well.
So that's the final teaching you want to leave us with? Oh my. We have we have thanked of Judy and Mark. This is a philanthropic endeavor, so if you're interested in being part of supporting this initiative, this fund, speak to me. The theme here has been Shorashim, roots, legacy, and I want to give you a bit of Schindler trivia, which is this. The roots of our three scholars this year are England, UK, United States, and Israel, which is a very interesting thing considering that Reb Pesach came from Europe. If not mistaken, he did have a stop in the UK on his way to New York, correct? Maybe even to Canada on the way, I'm not sure. He got around. He had a lot of stickers on his trunk. If we didn't bring together the four corners of the Jewish world, we certainly brought together three, and I think we get extra credit because here we are. But just in case we didn't get extra credit, I want to bring the fourth corner now, which has to be music. It has to be music, because I hear that this was a teacher who always had a song in his heart. So we have a special treat. This is actually a nigun that actually Jonathan Lipnick, who's here, learned from Reb Pesach. And we're going to end with that. And then we're going to go upstairs and eat the herring. So Jonathan, thanks for being here.
Okay.
And,
Hi, everyone. Okay,
and
so
this is the fourth corner.
So my name is Jonathan. I was here as a student. Today I teach here, but back in 2002, 2003, I was a student before this building existed. It was somewhere over there or something. And most of my time was spent doing Talmud with Josh and Josh Kolb, Rabbi Josh Kolb, Dr. Rabbi Josh Kolb. But there was kind of one little exception to that, which was Rabbi Pesach Schindler's Chassidut class, where I really felt kind of like a fish out of water. We were doing Parashat HaShavua with the classical works of Chassidut, the Kedushas Levi, and the Sfas Emes, and I mean names that I kind of, these things sort of I have to admit, I haven't really consulted many of these texts since 2002. A lot of it was sort of over my head. But Rabbi Pesach would always insist that we finished every shiur with a nigun. And those of you who knew him knew that he had a real sort of soft spot in his heart for the more difficult nigunim, right? It wasn't the kind of Haight-Ashbury influenced Chassidut of the 20th century. It was the Austro-Hungarian Chassidut of the 17th, the 18th century. And he loved the Mujitz melodies. Many of you probably are familiar with them. So I want to teach you guys a little melody. He taught it to us for El Adon. And I don't think that's actually the way that it's really, I think it was composed for one of the piyutim that we sing on Rosh Hashanah right before the Kedusha, which is Ein Kitzba Lishnotecha. Okay, maybe some of you are familiar with that tune. Those words. I'm not going to use that text because I think it's kind of too convoluted, too difficult to. But I think many of you probably are familiar with El Adon. So let's just do the tune first. I'm going to do this very quickly. I'm not going to do it justice, but this is a melody which you have to kind of imagine. He always told us, like, you can imagine the Hasidim were sitting in their villages and they would listen to the troops, the Russian troops or the Polish army would be marching by, and they learned these kind of marches, and they were inspired by them, and they brought them into the Beit Knesset. It was sort of the pop music of the period. Okay, so it starts out like this. Bum 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 ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum bum ba-dum ba-dum bum bum ba-dum bum 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 ba-da-da-dum bum bum ba-dum ba-da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na.
I'm sorry, that's how it starts?
That's how it starts. That's how it starts. El Adon al kol hama'asim baruch hu mevorach befi kol neshama gadlo v'tuvo ma'ale olam da'atu tevuna mashmi'im oto. And then it gets changed. What's difficult about these tunes is they change every stanza as a new melody. So again, I'm not going to take over the whole evening, and because it would take a long time. Let's just do one more bite, one more stanza. המתגאה על חיות הקודש פום 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 נה 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 פום 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 Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you,